Okay, so get ready for this one.
Yeah.
This deep dive is going to be a wild one.
Oh.
We're talking online betting, the 2020 U.S. presidential election, and maybe even a little organized crime.
It does sound like a movie.
Doesn't it?
It really does.
And get this,
Yeah.
the source for this deep dive
What is
is
it?
a satirical dialogue set in heaven.
Oh, wow.
Imagine, like, George Carlin,
Yeah.
God and Tony Soprano,
Interesting.
all just sitting around,
Yeah.
talking about the 2020 election.
But that's not your typical political analysis.
Well, no. So before we get into this heavenly debate, let's set the stage.
Right.
The story centers around Polymarket. It
Okay.
was this online platform where people could bet on real-world events.
Like a prediction market, but with money.
Yeah, exactly. And you can imagine
Yeah.
things got pretty heated around the 2020 election.
You think?
Especially,
Not every day you can bet on who's going to be president.
right, that's the whole thing.
Right.
Yeah.
There were some allegations that people connected to organized crime were using Polymarket to try and influence the election.
So we're talking like actual mobsters trying to rig the election through online betting.
That's the allegation.
That's insane.
It is.
So the claim is that they were placing these massive bets on Trump to win,
Yeah.
even when polls and predictions were saying otherwise.
It's like they were trying to create this illusion that he had a better chance than he actually did.
So if this is true,
Yeah.
wouldn't that be like super illegal?
No.
Wouldn't authorities be all over this?
Well, they were.
Really?
The FBI actually launched an investigation into Polymarket.
Wow.
They even raided the CEO's apartment and took his devices.
They weren't messing around.
No, they weren't.
So this wasn't just some random online gossip.
No, this was a serious federal investigation.
But here's what I don't get.
Yeah.
Wasn't Polymarket already controversial enough?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Just by existing.
They weren't even legally accessible within the U.S.
Really?
at the time.
So
anyone placing bets from inside the country,
How?
including these alleged mob figures,
Yeah.
had to use VPN
VPN.
to hide their location.
So they were going through all this trouble
Seems like it.
to hide their activity.
Yeah.
You would think if these bets were just like smart investments,
Right.
why all the secrecy?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it seems like that's the question that our satirical source is trying to answer.
Okay.
You know, they're bringing these big characters,
Yeah.
Carlin, God, Tony Soprano,
Right.
and using their voices to sort of explore the different sides and motivations involved.
So they're tackling this really serious and complex issue
Yeah,
with satire.
with satire.
It's not your typical approach
It's not.
to political commentary.
It's unconventional, but it's compelling
Definitely.
because they're using humor
Right.
to address these sensitive topics.
In a way that's still thought-provoking
Yeah.
and engaging.
It's like they're holding up a funhouse mirror to reality and making us see how absurd it all is.
So does the source, like, take a side? Does it come to any conclusions?
That's where things get even more interesting.
Okay.
They don't offer straightforward answers.
Oh, really?
Instead, they use these characters
Right.
to embody different viewpoints.
Okay.
God, for
Yeah.
example,
Mhm.
is portrayed as being kind of detached
Detached.
and amused by the whole thing.
So God's just, like, watching this all unfold.
Yeah, and he actually seems to find some entertainment value in Trump,
Wait.
which is
See,
kind of ironic.
God's like a Trump fan in this.
It seems that way.
That's hilarious, but also kind of disturbing.
It is a little bit of both.
And what about Tony Soprano?
Oh.
Where does he fit in?
He represents the alleged mob involvement.
Okay.
But of course, in classic Tony Soprano fashion,
Yeah.
he downplays everything.
Of course he does.
Claims the bets were just smart investments. And even tries to spin it as a patriotic act.
Hold on.
Yeah.
He's saying rigging an election is patriotic.
Well, that's his take on it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's classic Tony Soprano.
It really is.
The source uses him to satirize how people involved in organized crime try to make their actions seem legitimate.
Right.
It makes you wonder, are they really that naive?
Yeah.
Or are they just trying to fool everyone?
That's a good question.
It is.
What about George Carlin?
Ah, Carlin.
Is he just there for the ride?
No, he plays a big role.
Okay.
His character is really the heart of the whole piece.
Interesting.
He's the voice of reason,
Okay.
the one who sees through all the BS
Right.
and calls out the hypocrisy.
So he's like the skeptical one.
Yeah, he's skeptical of God's amusement and Tony's justifications.
He's like the audience expressing the frustrations we would all feel in this situation.
That's a good way to put it.
Right.
He's asking the tough questions,
Yeah.
demanding accountability. And through these interactions with God and Tony, the source highlights how ridiculous and ethically messed up this situation is.
Right, where you've got
Yeah.
these powerful figures potentially manipulating things for their own gain or amusement.
Exactly.
Wow.
It's a lot to unpack,
It is.
but it's a fascinating story
Yeah, definitely.
with a lot of layers.
For sure.
And Carlin's reactions in all this are priceless.
Yeah.
He's just totally exasperated by God's, nonchalance
Mm-hmm.
and Tony's blatant disregard for the rules.
He's like the part of us
Yeah.
that wants to believe in a just world,
Totally.
but keeps seeing all this evidence to the contrary. It makes you wonder what Carlin would have to say
Oh, man.
about all these online platforms like Polymarket
I know.
and how they might be affecting our politics.
It's a good question.
Right.
Imagine Carlin
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about betting on democracy.
I can just hear him now.
I bet he'd be pointing out how ridiculous it is.
Oh.
To reduce something as complex as politics to simple bets
Right.
and how that could really mess with people's perceptions.
And undermine our whole democratic system.
Exactly.
Plus, I bet he'd have a field day.
Oh, yeah.
With the people trying to manipulate those bets for profit.
For sure.
It makes you think.
Yeah.
Are these online platforms really just neutral marketplaces?
Right.
Or are they becoming tools for the rich and powerful to control things even more?
That's a question we should all be asking.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the newness of it all.
The technology, the excitement.
Right. But we have to think about the consequences.
Intended or unintended?
Yeah, are we creating a world where whoever has the most money can just shape public opinion,
Yeah.
control what happens?
That's kind of scary.
It is a little bit.
It's like we're in uncharted territory
Totally.
with no map.
And the stakes are high.
So high.
This isn't like betting on a football game.
No.
We're talking about the future of democracy.
Maybe even the future of our society.
It's a lot.
It is.
So where do we go from here?
Right.
How do we deal with this new reality?
Where these online platforms have so much power.
Well, I think the first step is to be more critical of the information we see online.
Especially online.
Right.
We can't just believe everything we read.
No, we can't.
We have to develop those media literacy skills.
Right, like learning how to evaluate sources
Yeah.
and being aware of our own biases.
So not just being skeptical of the platforms themselves,
Uh-huh.
but also being aware of our own tendency to believe things that fit our existing beliefs.
Exactly.
It's so easy to fall into those echo chambers
He is.
where we only see information that reinforces what we already think.
Right, and that can really distort our understanding of things.
We need to make an effort to seek out different viewpoints,
Yes.
even ideas that challenge our assumptions.
Absolutely.
It sounds like we need to become more like investigators.
I like that.
When we're online,
Yeah.
don't just scroll through your feeds passively.
Right.
Engage with the content actively.
Ask questions.
Yeah.
Fact check things.
Okay.
Think about the motivations of the people sharing the information.
So it's not about being cynical.
Yeah.
It's about being informed
Exactly.
and discerning.
Right. Critical thinking is about being thoughtful and informed.
Okay, what about the platforms themselves?
Mm-hmm.
Do they have a responsibility to address these concerns?
Good question.
Or are they just neutral platforms with no responsibility for what's shared on them?
That's a big debate right now.
It is.
Some people say these platforms should be held accountable for misinformation and manipulation.
Right.
Others say they're just providing a space for people to express themselves.
And that regulating content would be censorship
Yeah, it's a complicated issue.
with no easy answers.
For sure.
And it seems like the lines between information, entertainment, and manipulation are getting blurrier all the time.
You're absolutely right.
That's a key takeaway from this whole Polymarket thing.
Yeah.
It shows that we need to have a bigger conversation about the role of these online platforms and how to make sure they're being used responsibly and ethically.
It's a reminder that technological progress isn't always a good thing.
It's not.
Sometimes it comes with unintended consequences.
And ethical dilemmas.
And that's where the satire of our source material comes in.
Okay.
It uses humor to highlight these uncomfortable truths.
Right.
Like how technology designed to connect and inform us can actually be used to deceive and manipulate.
It's like the satire itself is a form of critical thinking,
Yeah.
encouraging us to question whether technology is really neutral
Right.
and to think about the intentions of the people using it.
Exactly.
That's why it's so important to engage with different kinds of media and viewpoints.
I agree.
Satire, humor, even fiction can give us insights into complex social issues.
And help us understand the world better.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener.
It has.
It started with a story about online betting and organized crime,
Yeah.
but it's turned into a much deeper conversation
It has.
about the power of online platforms, the importance of critical thinking,
Right.
and how truth and manipulation are changing in the digital age.
It's amazing how these seemingly unrelated things can connect.
I know it is.
It shows how interconnected our world really is.
And how important it is to be curious and discerning.
Absolutely.
So what about our listeners?
Yeah.
What are the key takeaways from this deep dive?
Good question. I think the biggest thing is we can't just be passive anymore
Right.
when we're looking at information.
We can't just be taking in information.
Right, we have to be active.
We got to question things.
Yeah, we just got to question everything.
Dig deep.
Especially with these online platforms that are becoming such a big part of our lives.
They're everywhere.
They are.
Yeah.
This whole Polymarket story,
Yeah.
it shows how even something that seems harmless
Right.
can be a breeding ground for manipulation and fake news.
Yeah. It's a real wake-up call.
It is.
We got to be more careful about what we believe and where we're getting our information. We can't just assume everything we see online is the whole truth.
No, there's always more to the story.
Right.
There are hidden motives, agendas.
Things we don't even know about.
Exactly.
It's easy to get caught up in a story.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when it's something big.
With powerful people.
Yeah. But that's when we need to step back.
And think critically.
Look at the information carefully.
It's like in our source material.
With the satire.
Yeah, it reminds us not to take everything so seriously.
Right.
And be open to different perspectives.
Sometimes humor can be a good way.
To see the truth.
Yeah.
Sometimes the truth is hidden behind all this complexity or bias.
It's funny how a story set in heaven
I know.
with God and George Carlin and Tony Soprano
Right.
can teach us so much about the real world.
It's like they're using this crazy situation to hold up a mirror.
To our own society.
Yeah, and make us confront some uncomfortable things.
That's satire for you.
Yeah.
It cuts through all the noise.
And shows us how absurd things really are.
It makes us think critically.
And question our assumptions about the world.
So what's the advice?
If we had to give some advice,
Yeah, based on all this.
what should people listening take away from this?
From this crazy deep dive.
Be skeptical.
Okay.
Don't believe everything you see online.
Especially when it comes to money and power.
Yeah.
Be curious.
Yeah, dig deeper. Ask questions. Look for different points of view.
Okay.
And don't be afraid to laugh.
Find the humor.
Yeah. Sometimes humor is the best way to deal with how complicated the world is.
That's good advice.
It is.
Be skeptical, be curious, and find the humor.
That's how you survive the digital age.
Without losing your mind.
And maybe even learn something along the way.
Well said.
Thanks.
This deep dive has given me a lot to think about.
Me too.
I hope it's done the same for you listening.
Yeah.
Until next time, stay curious and keep questioning everything.
Always question.